I walked into that boardroom with a pitch that would revolutionize how our agency handled social media campaigns. Spent 3 months developing it on my own time. Researched competitors, built mock campaigns, created projections showing we could triple client engagement and double revenue within a year. My boss looked at the presentation for exactly 90 seconds before laughing and saying, "Stick to your day job, kid." Then he took my entire concept, presented it as his own the following week, and landed a $3 million contract. When I confronted him, he fired me for insubordination. 18 months later, I owned that account, every major client he had, and his biggest contract. His agency closed 6 months after that. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe, because what I built from that firing will show you exactly how to turn betrayal into victory. I started working at Preston Marketing Group right out of college. 22 years old, with a degree in marketing from Arizona State University. The agency was mid-sized, about 30 employees based in downtown Phoenix. They handled digital marketing for local and regional businesses, social media management, website design, content creation, email campaigns. Standard stuff, but they were good at it. My boss was the founder, Richard Preston. 50 years old, built the agency from scratch 20 years prior. He had that old-school marketing mentality: billboards, print ads, direct mail. He adapted to digital eventually, but never really understood it the way younger people did. He hired me specifically because he needed someone who grew up with social media, someone who understood platforms intuitively. I started as a social media coordinator, entry level, managed client accounts, posted content, responded to comments, tracked analytics. It was fine. I was learning the business side of marketing, how agencies work, how client relationships function, how campaigns get built and executed. Richard was demanding, but not terrible. He expected results, but gave you space to figure out how to get them. After 2 years, I got promoted to social media strategist. More responsibility, bigger clients. I started developing campaign strategies rather than just executing what others designed. I was good at it. Clients liked me. My campaigns consistently outperformed expectations. Engagement up, conversions up, client retention up. I thought I was building a career. Around year 3, I noticed something. The agency was not innovating. We were doing the same strategies we did 3 years ago. Posting schedules, hashtag research, engagement tactics, all effective but basic. Meanwhile, competitors were experimenting with influencer partnerships, user-generated content campaigns, interactive experiences. We were falling behind. I brought this up in team meetings, suggested we explore new approaches. Richard would nod, say that sounded interesting, then do nothing. He was comfortable. The agency was profitable. Why fix what was not broken? But I saw clients starting to ask questions, starting to mention things they saw competitors doing. We were not losing clients yet, but the writing was on the wall. So I started working on something. On my own time, nights and weekends, a comprehensive new approach to social media marketing. The core idea was integration. Instead of treating social media as one channel among many, we would make it the center of everything. Build campaigns that started on social platforms and rippled outward. Use social listening to drive all other marketing decisions. Create content that was designed for sharing rather than just viewing. I spent 3 months developing this. Research, case studies, mock campaigns for our existing clients showing how this approach would improve results. Financial projections, competitive analysis. I built a full presentation deck, 50 slides, every detail thought through. I was excited. This could transform the agency, put us ahead of competitors, land bigger clients. I genuinely believed I was about to help take the company to the next level. I asked Richard for time in the weekly leadership meeting, said I had a strategic proposal. He agreed, gave me 15 minutes on the agenda. I showed up prepared, practiced my pitch a dozen times, knew every slide, every data point, every response to potential objections. I started presenting, got through the problem statement, Our current approach is effective, but not differentiated. Competitors are innovating. We need to lead rather than follow. Richard was checking his phone. I continued, presented the solution. Social first strategy, integration across all channels, new metrics for success. Richard looked up, glanced at a few slides. Then he stopped me. He said this was interesting, but not realistic. That our clients were not ready for this level of complexity. That what we do works, and we should focus on execution rather than experimentation. I tried to show him the projections, the data supporting this approach. He cut me off, said, "I appreciate the effort, but stick to your day job, kid." The leadership team chuckled. I felt my face get hot. I closed my laptop and left the room. I was humiliated, spent 3 months building something I believed in, and got dismissed in 90 seconds. But I told myself it was fine. Richard built this agency. He knows what he is doing. Maybe I was too ambitious, too eager. I went back to my regular work and tried to forget about it. 2 weeks later, Richard called an all-hands meeting, said he had exciting news. The agency was implementing a new strategic direction, social-first marketing, integration across channels, exactly what I had pitched. He presented my slides, my research, my projections, word for word in some places. He never mentioned my name, took full credit, said this vision would transform the agency, and he was excited to lead everyone through it. I sat in the back of that room stunned. He stole my work, completely. Then presented it as his own. After the meeting, I went to his office, asked to talk. He said, "Make it quick." I told him that presentation was my work, that he rejected it 2 weeks ago. He looked at me and said, "Ideas are not copyrighted, that once you present something at work, it belongs to the company, that I should be grateful he saw value in it." I said he could have at least credited me. He said credit does not matter, results matter. Then he told me to get back to work. I walked out of his office shaking, not just angry, betrayed. I had trusted him, thought we had a professional relationship built on mutual respect. I was wrong. He saw me as a resource to extract value from. Nothing more. A month after Richard stole my presentation, he landed a massive client using that exact pitch. A national retail chain looking to overhaul their entire digital marketing strategy. $3 million annual contract. Biggest deal in the agency's history. Richard announced it at a company meeting, took full credit, said his vision and leadership made it possible. Never mentioned me. But here is the thing. I was assigned to that account because I was the social media strategist, and this was a social-first campaign, which meant I had to execute the strategy I designed while Richard got all the credit and all the money. I got a small raise, $2,000 a year. Richard got bonuses and equity growth that likely totaled in the hundreds of thousands. For 6 months, I executed that campaign, worked 60-hour weeks, built everything from scratch, coordinated across teams, managed client relationships. The campaign was a massive success. Engagement up 180%. Sales conversions up 90%. The client was thrilled. Richard was thrilled. I was exhausted and bitter. Then I made a mistake. In a one-on-one meeting with Richard, I mentioned that I was glad my strategy was working so well, that it validated the approach I had developed. Richard's face went cold. He said my strategy. I said yes, the social-first approach I pitched. He said that was his strategy, that I was just executing. I said he rejected it when I presented it. He said I was remembering wrong, that he had been developing this approach for months before I ever brought it up. I could not believe what I was hearing. He was rewriting history, gaslighting me. I said I had the original presentation deck with timestamps. He said that does not prove anything, that I probably built it after hearing him discuss the approach. I said that is not true. He said this conversation was over, that if I had a problem with how credit was assigned, I could find another job. Then he asked me to leave his office. I should have quit right then. But I needed the job, had rent, student loans, could not just walk away. So I stayed, kept working, kept executing campaigns that were making Richard rich while I got scraps. Kept telling myself this was temporary, that eventually I would find something better. 3 months later, Richard fired me, called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, said my attitude had become a problem, that I was not a team player, that I questioned leadership too much. I asked for examples. He said it was a pattern, that he had been getting complaints. I asked from who. He said that was confidential. Then he handed me a severance agreement. 2 weeks' pay. Sign it today or get nothing. I signed it. What choice did I have? I packed my desk. Security walked me out. I sat in my car in the parking lot, feeling like my career was over. 25 years old. Fired from my first real job. For what? For creating something valuable that my boss stole. For pointing out that he took credit for my work. I was humiliated, angry, lost. That night, I talked to my roommate, told him everything. He said I should sue. I said for what? Wrongful termination, wage theft maybe. But lawsuits are expensive and time-consuming, and there is no guarantee I would win. He said, "So what are you going to do?" I said, "I do not know." He said, "You are smart. You built something that made that guy millions. Why not build something for yourself?" That conversation planted a seed. Why not? I had the skills, the knowledge, the strategy. I just needed clients. And I knew exactly where to find them. The people I had worked with at Preston Marketing Group. The clients who knew me, who knew the campaigns I built were mine, even if Richard took credit. What if I reached out to them directly? I spent the weekend putting together a plan. First, I registered an LLC, Jackson Digital Solutions. My name is Alex Jackson. Got a business license. Opened a business bank account. Set up a basic website. Built a portfolio showcasing the work I did at Preston Marketing Group. Could not claim ownership officially, but I could show I was the strategist on those accounts. The results spoke for themselves. Monday morning, I started reaching out, not to Preston Marketing clients. That would be tortious interference. But to former clients. Companies that had worked with Preston ended their contracts and moved on. I had maintained relationships with some of them, sent connection requests, offered coffee meetings, just catching up. Over the next 2 weeks, I met with 5 former clients, told them I had left Preston and started my own agency, that I was offering the same strategic approach they had seen before, but with more personalized service and better pricing. 3 of them were interested. 1 signed immediately. A local restaurant chain that had left Preston 6 months prior because they felt neglected. They remembered me, trusted me, gave me a $10,000 monthly retainer. That first client covered my basic expenses, rent, food, business costs. I worked out of my apartment, did everything myself, strategy, content creation, posting, analytics. It was a lot, but I was motivated. I was building something mine, something Richard could not take. A month later, I signed 2 more clients, a fitness brand and a real estate company, both former Preston clients who knew my work. Combined, they brought in another $15,000 per month, $25,000 total monthly revenue. After expenses, I was netting about $12,000 a month, more than I made at Preston, and it was mine. But I wanted more than survival. I wanted revenge, not petty revenge, strategic revenge. I wanted to take everything Richard had built, using my ideas, and make it mine. So I started targeting Preston's current clients, carefully, legally. I reached out to people I had worked with directly, not pitching immediately, just reconnecting, seeing how they were doing, how their campaigns were performing, planting seeds. What I learned was interesting. After I left, the quality of work at Preston declined. Richard did not understand the strategy well enough to execute it himself. He assigned it to other team members who were learning as they went. Clients were frustrated. Results were slipping. They were not leaving yet, but they were open to alternatives. 6 months after starting my agency, I landed the big one, the national retail client, the $3 million account Richard had won using my pitch. Their marketing director reached out to me directly, said they knew I was the one behind their original campaign. That quality had dropped since I left Preston. Asked if I would be interested in taking over their account. I could not say yes fast enough. We met. I presented an updated version of the original strategy, showed them what I could do without the constraints of working through Preston. They loved it. 2 weeks later, they terminated their contract with Preston Marketing Group and signed with Jackson Digital Solutions. $1.8 million annual contract. Not quite the $3 million they were paying Preston, but I had lower overhead and could offer better pricing while still making huge margins. When Richard found out, he called me, screamed that I had stolen his client, that he would sue me for tortious interference. I said calmly that the client reached out to me, that I did not solicit them, that they chose to leave based on poor performance, that everything I did was legal. He threatened to destroy me. I said good luck. Then I hung up. Over the next year, I took 4 more of Preston's clients, not through solicitation, through reputation. Word spread that I was the one behind the successful campaigns at Preston, that I was now independent and available. Clients came to me. By 18 months after being fired, I had 12 clients. Total annual revenue of $3.2 million. Staff of 6. Office space in Scottsdale. I was running a legitimate agency. Preston Marketing Group, meanwhile, was collapsing. Richard lost his biggest clients, could not replace them because his reputation was damaged. People knew he took credit for others' work, that he drove away the talent that made him successful. He had to lay off staff, downsize office space, take on smaller clients at lower rates. His agency went from 30 employees to 8 in a year. 2 years after I started Jackson Digital Solutions, Preston Marketing Group closed. Richard sent out a letter saying he was retiring, but everyone knew the truth. He failed. His agency died because he built it on stolen ideas and could not sustain it when the person behind those ideas left. I felt vindicated, not happy exactly, but satisfied. Justice had been served. It has been 4 years since Richard fired me. 4 years since I started Jackson Digital Solutions. And the agency is thriving in ways I never imagined when I was sitting in that parking lot feeling defeated. We are now at 22 employees. Annual revenue last year was $6.5 million. We have clients across the western United States, some national brands. We have been featured in marketing publications as an innovative agency to watch. I have been asked to speak at conferences about social-first strategies and building agencies in competitive markets. The work I did that Richard dismissed is now recognized industry-wide. Richard reached out once, about a year after his agency closed. Email, said he was happy to see my success, that he always knew I had potential. Asked if I would be interested in getting coffee and discussing potential collaboration. I deleted the email without responding. There was nothing to say. He had his chance to treat me with respect. He chose to steal and belittle. There are consequences for that. I also learned something interesting through industry connections. Apparently, I was not the first person Richard stole from. He had a pattern: hire young talent, extract their ideas, take credit, push them out when they got too expensive or too aware of what was happening. I was just the one who came back and destroyed him for it. Others had left quietly and rebuilt elsewhere. I respected their choices, but I am glad I made mine. The team I have built at Jackson Digital is different. I credit people properly. When someone brings an idea, their name goes on it. When campaigns succeed, the strategist gets recognized publicly. I pay well, offer equity to senior team members. Create an environment where people want to stay and grow. Not just because it is the right thing to do, but because I remember what it felt like to be used and discarded. I will never do that to someone else. I also mentor young marketers now, interns, junior staff, people at other agencies who reach out for advice. I tell them all the same thing: document your work, keep records of your ideas and contributions, build relationships directly with clients when possible. And if someone steals your work, do not just get angry, Get strategic. Build something better. Take what is rightfully yours. Not through lawsuits or drama, but through excellence. My personal life improved too. Met someone 2 years ago. Her name is Jordan. She runs a nonprofit focused on arts education. She is smart, driven, kind. We got engaged last month, getting married next spring. She knows the whole story about Richard and Preston marketing. She says she is proud of me for turning that betrayal into something positive. I appreciate that perspective. Financially, I am secure in ways I never was as an employee. Own my own home. No debt except the mortgage. Healthy retirement accounts. Emergency fund. The agency is profitable and growing. I take a reasonable salary and reinvest most profits into the business, building long-term value rather than extracting short-term cash. That is how you build something sustainable. I think about that boardroom moment sometimes. Richard laughing at my presentation, telling me to stick to my day job. That memory used to make me angry. Now, it just makes me grateful. Grateful he showed me who he was early. Grateful he fired me instead of keeping me trapped in a job where I would never be valued. Grateful he forced me to bet on myself. Because if he had not, I might still be there, making him rich while staying poor. That would have been the real tragedy. Do I wish he had been a better person? Sure. Would have been nice to work for someone who valued contributions and shared success. But he was not. And his failure to be decent created an opportunity for me to build something mine. Something better. Something that reflects my values. I will take that outcome. Richard lost everything because he thought ideas were free, that young employees were disposable, that taking credit for others' work had no consequences. He was wrong, and the market punished him for it. His clients left when they realized the talent behind their success was gone. His reputation collapsed when people understood his agency ran on stolen ideas. He ended his career in failure, while I am just getting started. That is not revenge. That is consequences. When you build a business on exploitation, eventually people figure it out. And when they do, you are left with nothing. Richard learned that the hard way. I hope he learned it. But honestly, I do not care if he did. He is not my problem anymore. 4 years later, I am 30 years old, running an agency that employs 22 people and generates millions in revenue, building campaigns that win industry awards, speaking at conferences, mentoring the next generation, engaged to someone I love, living a life that is mine. None of this would exist if Richard had not fired me, if he had not stolen my work and taken credit. His betrayal was the catalyst for everything I built. So in a weird way, I should thank him. Not because what he did was okay, but because it forced me to become someone I might not have otherwise. Someone who does not wait for permission. Someone who builds rather than complains. Someone who turns setbacks into opportunities. That is who I am now. And I like that person. The agency will keep growing. We have plans to expand into new markets, new service offerings, building partnerships with complementary businesses. I am thinking 5 years out, 10 years out. Building something that lasts. Something that can outlive me. Something that treats people right and still succeeds. That is the real victory. Not just beating Richard, but proving you can win without exploiting people. To anyone who has had their work stolen, who has watched someone else take credit for what you built, who has been fired for speaking up, I see you. I have been there, and I am telling you it does not have to end there. You can rebuild. You can take back what is yours, not through lawsuits or public fights, but through being better, building better, winning clients through excellence rather than theft. It takes time, it takes work, but it is possible. I am proof. And to the bosses out there who think young employees are disposable, who take credit for others' ideas, who fire people for having the audacity to point out what you did. Be warned, the people you exploit do not forget. They do not always stay down. Sometimes they get up, build something better. Take your clients, take your reputation, take everything, and you are left with nothing but the consequences of your choices. Ask Richard Preston how that worked out for him. 4 years ago, I walked into a boardroom believing my career was about to take off. Instead, my boss laughed at me, stole my work, and fired me. 18 months later, I owned the account he stole my ideas to win, his biggest clients, his reputation. And eventually, I watched his agency close while mine thrived. That is not luck. That is not coincidence. That is what happens when you bet on yourself and refuse to let someone else define your worth. So stick to your day job. No thanks, Richard. I built my own job, my own company, my own future. And it turns out I am pretty good at this. Better than you ever gave me credit for. Better than you ever could be. Because I do not need to steal from others to succeed. I just need to be myself. And that is enough. Have you ever had a boss steal your ideas and take credit? Did you fight back or move on? What would you do if someone fired you for speaking up about their theft? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story motivated you to stand up for yourself, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that betrayal can be the start of something better. Subscribe for more real stories about turning career disasters into victories. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing that young professionals deserve credit for their work and that consequences matter. Stay strong out there, and remember, the best response to someone stealing your ideas is building something so successful they cannot ignore that it was always yours. Keep fighting for what you deserve.